Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report News Hour for the 23rd day in the 6th month of the 16th year of Cheongi. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Cheongu, Kyung Chim-lin, and let's take our tour around the kingdom, shall we? Right now, in Chongpyeong, Tennessee, we have 72 degrees, mostly cloudy, getting up to 89 today, partly sunny and humid with a thunderstorm in parts of the area. Tonight, 69 for a low, partly cloudy and humid, a thunderstorm in spots late. In father's hometown, Cheongju, North Pyongan Province, in what is now North Korea. What is now, but the future may be different. 75 and partly sunny right now, getting up to 70 degrees tonight. Overcast, a shower in spots this evening, followed by a thunderstorm in spots late. Tomorrow, 84 for a high, more clouds than sun, humid with brief showers. Northeast Pennsylvania at the Cheonrygung Palace, currently light rain and 73, clouds and sun, hot and very humid, morning shower in spots, followed by a thunderstorm this afternoon, and a high of 91 today. Tonight, humid this evening with a heavy thunderstorm, otherwise partly cloudy, 66 for a low tonight. At the Liberty Rock RV Park and Campground in Limestone County, Texas, currently 70 degrees, partly cloudy, mostly sunny today and very warm, 96 for a high. Tonight, mainly clear, low of 72. And then at the Suncheon Palace in Korea, it is currently 76 and mostly cloudy. And 76 is the low for the night, cloudy and warm and humid with a couple of soaking showers. Tomorrow getting up to 83, so very little change in temperature. And then let's see here, 76 cloudy and warm and humid with a couple of soaking showers. Tomorrow, 83. I just noticed that I'm having a problem with my battery here. Oh, let's see here. Okay, there we go. Okay, that had a bad connection. It's fixed now, I think. Yes, okay, great. And now, okay, where was I? We're in Suncheon Palace, 76 for a low tonight, 83 for a high tomorrow, cloudy and very humid with occasional rain and a thunderstorm. Okay. Gunma Palace is in Japan, currently 83, mostly cloudy, 70 degrees for a low tonight, considerable cloudiness, getting up to 93 tomorrow, partly sunny, hot and humid, possible danger of dehydration. And at Ilan, Taiwan, currently 86 as they go into the evening, and 79 for a low tonight, becoming cloudy, 93 for a high tomorrow, considerable clouds. So I think, where did I see 96? All right, so yes. So Liberty Rock takes the prize today and have 96, or at least forecast have 96 tomorrow. Let's go to Father's Word. I'm in the book on true love, chapter 1, section 3. Father says here, in a speech that was published in 1980 in the magazine Tongil Sege, that's the sort of in-house magazine. Love is nice to think about. Love is nice to look at. Love is nice to taste. That is love. Okay. Love is nice to think about. Love is nice to look at. Love is nice to taste. 맛으로도 좋습니다. 맛, taste. 그것이 사랑입니다. All right. Praise God. Yes. Love, love, love. But remember the discipline of love, right? Love between husband and wife is not the same as a love between siblings, or a love between father and daughter, or mother and son. And the problem, one of the big problems that we have today, as Father's pointed out, is that people think that all love is good, but no, there is such a thing as unprincipled love. And Leviticus chapter 18 gives a whole list of examples of sexual relationships that are unprincipled, right? And so you can go to Leviticus 18 and go through that list. It's quite long, and it shows that the Father, God wanted the Israelites who had come out of Egypt to stop doing things in the way that they had seen the Egyptians do. They were there for 400 years, 4 centuries. So obviously they were influenced heavily by the Egyptian customs. Some people even suggest that the Christian and also Hebrew term amen, A-M-E-N, some people pronounce it amen. Amen comes from the name of the Egyptian sun god. I don't know if that's true or not, but possibly it is. But God, at the beginning of Leviticus 18, states very clearly, don't do things that you saw Egyptians doing, and don't do things the way that the people in Canaan, where you're about to go, are doing. I want you to follow a whole new set of rules, all right? And so he starts going through this whole list. God starts going through this whole list. Don't sleep with your mother. Don't have sex with your mother. Don't have sex with your sister. Don't have sex with your father's wife. Because this was, I guess, fathers, I guess, had more than one wife. I don't know. And anyway, he goes through this whole list, including, homosexuality is also described in that chapter as being one of the things that God does not want. So love is nice, as Father says, to look at. It's nice to think about. It's nice even to taste. But Father also teaches very strongly that love requires discipline. There's a discipline to love. And it was unprincipled love, or undisciplined love, you might say, or unprincipled love that was behind the fall. When that was behind the fall. Because the power of the principle, the power of unprincipled love, power of love, whether principled or unprincipled, is the strongest force in the universe. So unprincipled love is also strongest force in the universe. And God created it that, or he actually didn't create it that way, I'm sorry. God did not create love. Love has always existed. But it is the strong, well, we can say it this way: God did not create any force stronger than love, right? I think that's the way to put it. He did not create love, but he chose not to create any force stronger than love. And that's because love, I think of love as kind of super glue, And super glue is great if you want to fix things, things. But if you put super glue on your hand and then stick it to your desk, then you're in trouble, aren't you? Little kids. This is why you have to keep super glue out of the hands of small children, because they may do something foolish with it, right? So the use of super glue requires that you practice a certain discipline. In the same way with love, or similar way with love. Because if a boy and a girl fall in love with each other before they are ready to be blessed in marriage, and then because, oh, I know, I love you, and then they have sex with each other, then everything falls apart. So love requires discipline. And this is something that God wanted the Israelites to understand as they were coming out of Egypt and going into Canaan, because there was no discipline to the Egyptians' love. There was no discipline to the Canaanites' love. But God wanted the Israelites to have the discipline of love, the discipline of love. And that's incredibly important for us today as we live in these last days. There's a whole lot of confusion. And a lot of the confusion and a lot of the evil in the world comes from this lack of discipline, lack even of the knowledge that love requires discipline. That love requires discipline. All right, so I hope that we can understand that point and teach it to others as we go along. Something that children need to understand. I think that's probably a talk that parents need to have with their children at an early age, at a very early age. Okay, that love requires discipline. Okay, in order to be, a positive force. If undisciplined blood, unprincipled love, is a destructive force. All right, then let's see what's going on. Today, there's some stuff going on. There's some stuff going on, but nothing that really jumps out at me. Of course, there's always stuff going on. All right. These. Well, no, let's not do that. Okay. Okay, I was going to say the people who are, they're coming up with all these stories about Xi Jinping in China and stuff like that. They're really being more and more creative. But anyway, let's not do that. I want to do this piece on Jinmen Islands, Taiwan's front line with China. And I've showed you the map on this before. And it's really, I think most people don't realize how close these islands are to mainland China. And when you see how close they are, you wonder, well, how is it possible that China has not grabbed these islands? And they did try. They did try. Okay. So here's, I think you can see this, right? Tech team, tell me if you can't. Here's Taiwan proper. Okay, here's the island, the country of Taiwan here. And this is basically sort of the middle point of Taiwan. And then Jinmen Island is over here. It's right next to the mainland. And this is actually a large city here. I forgot the name, Xiamen or something like that. And so I want to look at a sort of a historical piece right now. We can talk about, where'd it go? Here it is. Okay. About the role that these islands have played in the struggle between the Chinese Communist Party and the government on the island of Taiwan. Just a few miles off the mainland, the Jinmen Islands could be attacked first if China invades Taiwan. And this is a tank that is looks like the beach there, and it's just sort of it's been there since a previous battle between Taiwan and China. And it's there on one of the beaches there in the Jinmen. Okay, Jinmen Islands is a small Taiwanese territory located a few miles off the coastline of mainland China in Xiamen Bay. Xiamen is the name of the city. Okay. The largest island is encircled by a sandy shoreline and studded by rocks. The island is 93 miles away from the Taiwan mainland, but being so close to the Fujian coast of mainland China, it has historically been within range of communist artillery batteries and surveillance. The close proximity of the Jinmen Islands to mainland China has placed it on the front line of several conflicts between the Republic of China and People's Republic and the Republic of China. So People's Republic is the, anytime you see a country that has the name people in it, the word people in its name. What do you know? Well, you know it's communist. Okay. It's it's people here does not really mean people. It means people loyal to the Communist Party. So anyway, conflicts between the People's Republic and the Republic of China, meaning it could be the target of any future Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Possibly. In 1949, Republic of China leader Chiang Kai-shek retreated his forces to the island of Formosa. The Chinese name Taiwan was rarely used at this time. Formosa, I think, may have been a Portuguese concoction. Portugal, I think, was one of the first to. It was one of the first Western colonial powers to establish themselves on this island after being forced to withdraw from the mainland by the communist offensive. The defense of Formosa required a perimeter in the form of the offshore islands. Most precarious among these was the fishing community that inhabited Quemoy or Jinmen. Since 1948, the reeling nationalists planned, albeit in haphazard fashion, on withdrawing from the mainland and to scatter their army's veteran divisions among China's coastal or offshore islands. By April of the following year, it was reported that nearly 2 million nationalist soldiers and civilians had evacuated to Formosa. When the new communist rulers in Peking, now Beijing, declared the People's Republic in October 1949, Mao Zedong was determined to quash every last vestige of the defeated Kuomintang. And this is Chiang Kai-shek at that time. With its ranks numbering in the millions, the People's Liberation Army had its orders and remained on the offensive. The Battle of Jinungtao on Jinmen spanned the last weeks of October and was underway once communist troops had occupied Xiamen, the island barely 2.5 miles from Jinmen. On 22 October, it was believed that at least 2 infantry divisions were prepared for a crossing. By the reckoning of the nationalists, this force numbered at least 20,000 communist soldiers. The amphibious operation was underway from 24 October. Unpredictable fighting lasted until 28 October. I think unpredictable means they didn't know who was going to win. It was impossible to predict who was going to win. I think that's what it means. Contrary to the myth of their limited skill at naval warfare, the communists reached the shore unopposed and assaulted a spit of rock-strewn beach on the island's northern shoal. This was Guningtao. How the battle unfolded on the first day is poorly recorded, although it's known that the nationalists were caught by surprise and initially put up a feeble defense with just machine guns. The communists took appalling losses, but undeterred, moved inland on foot. The close quarters fighting dragged on until the next day when artillery from the Chinese coast hammered the defending KMT troops, as Kuomintang troops. Less is known about the communist forces than the nationalists, who were led by trusted veterans of the KMT armed forces, such as Chiang Wei-kuo, the adopted son of the dictator Chiang Kai-shek. As an officer in the nationalist army who had trained in Germany and commanded a tank unit, he utilized what little armor could be mustered to scatter the communists. And this is an oyster farming. Pulls a cart near this Kunmingdao village in Jinmen, with the shaman in the background. So this is the mainland city. Okay, this is the communist city. And then this is the Xiamen Island under Taiwan's control. So you can see how close the two are. Another stalwart who joined the battle was no less than General Hu Lian, who had served the KMT since the 1930s and had arrived on the second day of hostilities. Communist troops had almost overrun the village of Guningtao and were halted by the timely appearance of Lian's 12th Brigade. The balance of manpower between the communists and nationalists at Guningtao makes for a baffling assessment, as both sides had troops to spare. What decided the outcome were tanks and bomber aircraft, neither of which the communists could bring to the theater. In the case of the nationalists, these were outdated American-made M5A1 Stuart tanks, commanded by Chiang Wei-kuo. Even Wei-kuo's half-brother Chiang Ching-kuo had a role in the fighting, although this was obscured for the sake of his political career. Having spent his formative years in the Soviet Union as a de facto hostage, he returned to China with a Russian wife and was given a suitable rank in the army. To their credit, the Chang brothers had a profound influence preparing the offshore islands against fresh invasion attempts, and the work continued after 1951 when American advisors were embedded with nationalist units. And even today, there are members of the U.S. Military Special Forces training and supporting the Republic of China forces on Jinmen Island. So it's interesting that the U.S. actually has forces there. This is a building on Jinmen, still bears bullet holes and damage from the Battle of Quningdao. Right. According to Taiwanese accounts of the Battle of Quningdao, lasted 56 hours. Both sides suffered appalling losses, with the communists coming off worse. Their entire invasion force was decimated and some 10,000 stragglers surrendered. The nationalists' remaining light bombers flying in from airstrips 60 miles away helped scatter the enemy and prevent their evacuation attempts. For decades, this attempted communist landing, memorialized by the KMT regime in Taiwan, was ignored by the Western press and only considered a smaller clash in the long struggle for Jinmen and the offshore islands. When it was finally immortalized by Taiwan's press as a lasting victory against communism, it served to bookend the defeat suffered in the mainland and raise a new origin story for local heroism against invasion. It was a narrative that was acceptable for a Taiwanese citizenry fed with constant warnings about the mainland's design on their way of life. And here, this is communist nationalist artillery, blast communist-led positions from Jinmen Island. And this would be, I guess, back then, I guess. During the 1950s, the Taiwan Strait became the Cold War's deadliest flashpoint and potential theater for a nuclear showdown. Since 1949, when the Kuomintang retreated to Formosa, or Taiwan, and other offshore islands, the communists in Beijing slowly overwhelmed these garrisons. The greatest prize was the capture of sprawling Hainan in 1950, just months before 1 million Chinese troops, dubbed People's Volunteers, attacked UN forces in Korea. Right. So that occurred in October of 1950. So I guess this was must have been in September, or I guess months before. I guess okay. Yeah. By 1951, President Harry S. Truman's administration pivoted back to supporting the KMT after its abandonment in the late 1940s. The cherry on top was assigning U.S. Navy's 7th Fleet to sail its aircraft carriers across the strait, separating the main island of Formosa from the Chinese coast, which effectively blocked any invasion attempt. So not across, was it across the strait or through the strait? I don't know. The Truman administration, then the Dwight D. Eisenhower administration later on, Eisenhower was elected in 52 and took office in 53, maintained a pro-KMT stance with the caveat that fighting would not embroil U.S. air and naval assets in Japan and the Philippines. But this is exactly what happened in the final months of 1954, when Beijing moved its forces from Korea to the coastal southern provinces. So the Korean War ended in July, what came to an armistice agreement in July 1953. And so it looks like in the final months of 1954, about a year and a half afterward, Beijing moved its forces to the coastal southern provinces of China. The rationale from their perspective was clear. Since 1949, KMT-backed guerrillas smuggling rings in the offshore islands, such as Jinmen, had been blockading China's port cities. The People's Liberation Army struck on 5 September with a bombardment of Formosa's island chain, the Jinmen and Matsu clusters. The Dachin or Tachin Islands, located some 250 miles from Taiwan's coast, were pummeled into submission. And here, refugees being evacuated by U.S. forces from the Dachin or Tachin Islands moved to their embarkation point. By January 1955, dozens of U.S. Navy ships, organized as Task Force 502, evacuated 30,000 soldiers and civilians from the Dachans in the most brazen American intervention yet. The risk of a crossing by PLA divisions on boats panicked Taipei, and the aging Chiang Kai-shek wanted immediate American reinforcements. A subtler approach prevailed. In a matter of weeks, the superior air and naval resources of the U.S. military reinforced the Jinmen garrison with fresh artillery rounds for 6.1-inch or 155 millimeter M1 Long, Tom, and M114 howitzers. A rare gift of the U.S. Army to their Formosan allies were divisional 203 millimeter howitzers that had the range for hitting mainland China if they were positioned in concrete forts on the Matsus. And Matsus are sort of up the coast a bit from Jinmen. Over the years, hundreds of U.S. advisors under the Military Assistance Advisory Group relocated to Taiwan. The risk to Americans embedded with KMT command staff meant there had to be strict guidelines on decision-making, so the Eisenhower administration wrung a promise from Chiang Kai-shek there would be no attempts at a counter-invasion on the mainland in order to avoid starting World War III. Chinese nationalist pilots receive a final briefing before taking off in a U.S.-supplied planes to cover the evacuation of Tachin Islands. What became the first Taiwan Strait crisis, 54-55, was portrayed by the global press as a high-risk skirmish that ebbed as a result of decisive American intervention. But neither Taipei nor Beijing de-escalated in the ensuing years. Both sides grew their militaries, with KMT fielding between 400,000 and 600,000 troops in its army, including airborne and marine units patterned after their American equivalents. The remaining offshore islands, Jinmen and the tiny Matsu cluster, were reinforced with tunnel complexes and artillery. Constant surveillance and close calls with enemy aircraft were also ever present. The Mutual Defense Treaty and other obligations allowed the U.S. to deliver hundreds of brand new aircraft, including jets, to Taiwan's Republic of China Air Force. By the summer of 1958, the intelligence from Chinese coast set Taipei and Washington, D.C. on edge. The PLA was assessed to have collected some 200,000 troops and hundreds of artillery pieces in Fujian for an upcoming operation. Its navy had grown by leaps and bounds, with new gunboats armed with torpedoes. Even more troubling was the rise of its air force with 1,000 new Soviet fighters, the MiG-15 and MiG-17, and the Ilyushin 28 medium-range bomber. Matters got out of hand once again in 23 August of 1958, when coastal batteries hammered Jinmen with 40,000 shells inside 24 hours. Taiwanese troops keep watch on Jinmen in 1995. A shaken and injured Defense Minister Yu Ta-wei returned from Jinmen and met with the international press to make Taiwan's case. Beijing was ready to launch a full-scale assault. The 7th Fleet performed its usual mission, reinforcing the islands, while the ROC Air Force tangled with its rival on the mainland using air-to-air missiles. This time around, the pinnacle of U.S. military technology was lavished on Taiwan. The non-stop shelling of the Jinmen Islands lasted 44 days, with the 7th Fleet taking pains to avoid getting within howitzer range as it escorted the resupply missions, while the sky buzzed with Taiwanese saber jets. Aerial clashes with Chinese MiGs began at the start of August and lasted 2 months, the Cold War's first dogfights involving air-to-air missiles. The siege was lifted by October, but the circumstances remain debatable. Did Beijing hesitate and order a cessation when its army began to run low on artillery shells? Or did the implied threat of nuclear attacks on Chinese airfields serve as enough warning from the Americans? After all, the deployment of Matador cruise missiles armed with nuclear warheads on a Taiwanese airbase was a poorly kept secret. Other contingencies involved tactical nuclear warheads for 203 millimeter howitzers and the arming the Honest John rockets destined for Taiwan with the same. The PLA continued raining artillery shells on the Jinmen Islands. When President Eisenhower visited Taipei in June 1960, the PLA signaled its displeasure with 86,000 shells on Jinmen. The pattern continued every week, albeit with fewer shells and on select days for 2 decades. but the Eisenhower administration encapsulated the Taiwan Strait crises as separate campaigns of Chinese aggression. 2 decades. So going into the late 1970s, early 1980s. Okay, so not so long ago. I don't know. Maybe to some of you, 1980s is a long time ago, but to many of us, it's not. The truth was more complicated as the two regimes that once fought a civil war on the mainland continued their struggle in the nuclear age with the world's most advanced technology. But the course of history, as always, took unexpected turns in the following decades. By the 1960s, the Chinese mastered nuclear weapons and secret diplomacy was carried out with the Americans in the years after. On January 1, 1979, the bombardment of the Jinmen Islands stopped as Beijing and Washington, D.C. entered a new era of economic cooperation. Okay, so January 1, 1979, basically is when things stopped, right? So what do you think? Is China going to attack Taiwan, maybe beginning with a bombardment of Jinmen Island again? I don't know why they would bother with Jinmen Island. They could just attack Taiwan directly. But I don't know. I hesitate to make predictions because remember, I'm one of the people who was saying that, Putin's not going to invade Ukraine. It would be foolish for him to do so. And we were right. It was foolish for him to do so. But he did it anyway. So sometimes being right is not good enough. Yes, we were right, but yeah. But I was not the president of Russia, as it turns out. And I'm also not today the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. Neither am I the chairman of their military commission. And Xi Jinping, I think, is both of those. He's also president of the country, and he's that as well. So he's the guy that's going to make the decision. He's the guy. And I know you have all these stories running around about how Xi Jinping had a stroke and all that kind of stuff, but there's really very little evidence to back that up. I said at the beginning that people making these stories or spreading these stories are getting more creative. And there may be some kernels of truth to what they're saying. And I said before that, and I've experienced this directly. I was the victim one time of this kind of intelligence operation. I was used by a certain intelligence agency. An intelligence agency will plant a story which has some truth, and then they sort of fill in the blanks with their own creative storytelling, and they put it out to see what the reaction is. And the one that I'm referring to right now says that, remember when Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, in early June, said that China could not afford to have Russia lose the Ukraine war. That it was kind of an unusual statement. You usually don't say those kinds of things as a diplomat, especially since China is trying to pretend that they are a neutral party, that they even trying to bring peace to that conflict sometimes. So, and that is fact. Okay, so that's fact. So that's a true thing. But this sort of, and I'm pretty sure it's fake, and I'll tell you why. But the idea is that a Chinese diplomat in May defected to Russia with certain secret documents. Now, it is true that a Chinese diplomat defected in May, but not to Russia. Actually, the Chinese diplomat in May defected to Australia. But anyway, let's continue with the story. And do you think it's both as possible? Well, actually, it's extremely rare that Chinese diplomats defect. So the idea that two Chinese diplomats defected, one to Australia and one to Russia in May, in the same month is extremely improbable. And the reason that I know about the one to Australia is that this was reported by Bill Gertz of the Washington Times. And I know Bill, or I knew Bill, I guess I don't know him anymore. I knew Bill, and I know that his standard of journalism is quite high. And so I trust his reporting. He's broken a lot of really good stories. So on the one hand, we have a Chinese diplomat going to Australia, and that's, I think we can say that that is true. On the other hand, we have a supposed fictional Chinese diplomat going to Russia with secret documents. And these documents, which he turned over to the Russians, said that if Russia loses the war in Ukraine, China would support the Russian Communist Party so that the Russian Communist Party could return to power in Moscow. Okay, it gets better here. It gets better. And the purpose of this would be to increase the influence of communist parties in the rest of Europe. And there's no, actual reporting to back this up. But there may be some truth to this. Maybe some kernel of truth, maybe one or two kernels, maybe two or three. And if that is not successful, then China will take over Russian territory east of the Urals, or west of the Urals. Remember, this is something that I was talking about, right? That China may invade north. West of the Urals, or I'm sorry, east, I'm sorry, east of the Urals. So Siberia, basically. China would take over Siberia so as to get the resources that they need in order to strengthen their military to attack Taiwan. And remember, this is something that I was saying as well. So that could be another kernel of truth. But, it sounds to me like a story that was planted by an intelligence organization. That's just my sense. I think they are just trying to sort of kind of, maybe firing their gun in a dark room, hoping to hit something. I think that's what's happening here. Okay. Also, then at the end of this story, it's alleged that Russia actually took that diplomat who defected from China and returned him to Beijing with a diplomatic note saying that basically, we don't like what you're planning. We don't like what the papers say, the documents say, so don't think about that. So very interesting. Now, as we've been discussing, China is going to have a big shindig, big party in September to mark an anniversary of its military. What is it, the 80th or something like that? 80th anniversary or something like that, I think. Anyway, it's an anniversary of the military, and they're inviting a lot of foreign leaders. They've sort of been feeling out the president of South Korea even to see whether they can get him to attend. And so that is also true. And naturally, one would expect that it would be natural that Putin would also attend that event. And this event will show, we assume, it will show Xi Jinping's authority over the Chinese military and put to rest some of these stories that have been going around on YouTube talking about how Xi Jinping has lost power and actually someone else is in charge and this kind of thing. So Xi Jinping and Putin, it looks like, will be meeting in Beijing in September, early September, and we'll see what happens if they decide to make anything public from that meeting. We'll see what that is. But right now, the king is in Taiwan, and he is setting all sorts of conditions. And so we know that the spirit world is very, very sort of active in around the whole China, North Korea, Russia, sort of that sort of trinity there. And we'll see what finally happens. But I think we can expect some major changes, perhaps in one way or another. We'll see. We'll see. But as I said before, it would be hey, I'm giving advice to Xi Jinping, all right? Just like I gave advice to Putin in 2022. It would be in China's interest to attack north, to attack Siberia rather than Taiwan, because their military does not have a lot of combat experience for a long time now, and Russia's military has been weakened, and there's a lot of territory up there with a lot of resources, and especially water resources in northern China, northeastern China needs some water resources. So, hey, Mr. Xi, I'm telling you, you ought to attack Russia instead of Taiwan, and you'll thank me later. You'll thank me later. Okay. All right. Let's see here. So enough of that. Kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, but hey, listen, if the intelligence communities can do it, we can do it too. We can have fun as well. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what Xi Jinping finally decides to do. Yeah. All righty then. So, yeah, just not really a whole lot of stuff that's interesting going on. Of course, we have stuff going on, but let me go to Newsmax here. Some days just like this, just you have the usual stuff. You have Israel bombing Syria. You have votes being taken in the Senate and stuff like that. But none of that really catches my interest. Okay, like this, Senate passes $9 billion Doge cuts, 51 to 48. Okay, well, congratulations, but you still have to work with the House. All right, let's see. Trump plans to send tariff notice to 150 countries. Okay. And let's see. Trump to end Fed funds for California high-speed rail. Wasn't that ended a few times already? Or that high-speed rail seems to be going through kind of a 7 deaths and resurrection. Seems to always keep coming back. Anyway, we'll see what happens there. And and it's interesting that America just cannot get high-speed rail. On the East Coast, I know the Acela, or the Acela. Amtrak has the Acela, and that's sort of a pretend high-speed rail. I took the Acela a few times. It does not compare to anything that you see in Japan or even Korea. I have not taken the high-speed rail in China yet, but maybe if we have magnetic levitation, the maglev trains, which can actually travel at speeds that compete with airplanes, maybe then high-speed rail can come to the United States. All right, let's see here. Trump signs new law boosting fentanyl sentencing, but come on, Donald. I keep saying, you gotta, okay, this is good. You want to attack the supply side, but let's not forget the demand side, all right? Demand side. And how do you attack the demand side of fentanyl? Strengthen the families, not by giving them more money, okay, but by reducing and cutting out the policies that discourage families from staying together, such as some of the welfare policies that encourage divorce. Anyway, let's see here. Trump says, I'd love Powell to resign. Okay, well, that situation keeps going on. All right. But he also denies he intends to fire Jerome Powell anytime soon. Okay. And Dershowitz says there never was an Epstein client list. Wasn't he supposed to be on that list? I think I've seen his name bandied about. I don't know. Like I said, I think, my guess is that there was a list, but Mossad has it or the CIA has it. Someone like that. Israel has said that Epstein was not working with Mossad, and I'm sure they would tell us if he was, right? Just kidding. I'm sure they would not tell us if he was. Boy. Okay. Tom Homan says majority of deportees pose a threat. Okay. Jordan backs FBI probe of Comey and Clapper. All right. So that's good. And see. You don't see a problem. Okay, Fed board must cut interest rates now, says Navarro. And James Comey's daughter has been fired from the DOJ. Well, we never even knew that she was working there, did we? And she was on the Epstein case. Okay. Analyst says 2028 election looking bleak for Dems. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton says the 2018 general election is not looking for the Democrats. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Right now, President Trump's support is down, but not to crisis levels. On the Rasmussen, his overall approval is right now 47%, which is the low point. It's the lowest that he's had since he was inaugurated. So it's back down to that low point. We'll see whether it continues to go down. And White House is weighing at 26 replacements for Susan Collins. Yes, she's from Maine. She's a senator from Maine, and she often votes against President Trump. And she has even said that if there's a 50-50 split in the Senate, she may vote with Democrats in order to give Democrats the majority, to give them control of the Senate. Yeah, but for some reason, she seems to have a pretty strong personal political foundation in Maine. She may be difficult to replace. All right, let's see here. U.S. hit only one of 3 Iranian nuclear sites, according to a report. Okay. And China threatens sports deal over Costco. Costco is the not where you go to get your oatmeal. No, that's COSTCO. This is Costco, is the Chinese shipping company. And China is threatening to block the sale of more than 40 ports around the world. Let's take a look at this. China is threatening to block the sale of more than 40 ports around the world, all owned by Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison, to BlackRock and MSC if Costco, a Chinese shipping company, does not get a stake. The Wall Street Journal reported on Thursday, citing unnamed sources. Reuters could not immediately verify the Wall Street Journal report. Interesting. So China is really flexing its muscle. We'll see if they can be overcome there. And top NATO commander says more Patriot missiles, I'm sure that means not people, but missiles, moving to Kiev. And so here, GOP senators caution Trump against firing Fed chair. It's been speculated that firing the Fed chair would deal a blow to the dollar. But then President Trump, whether intentionally or not, has been bringing the value of the dollar down against other currencies since he began. It's down about 10% or something like that since January 20th. So I'm not sure that that's something that he would necessarily want to avoid, having the dollar, because it makes imports more expensive, and that has the same effect as a tariff. All right, pro-life group split on one-year Planned Parenthood cut. Okay. All right. Trump's push to restore tradition in education. That looks interesting. Let's take a look at this. They want me to sign up. Oh no. Now even Newsmax wants my, what is this? Premium. I guess they want me to give them money. Uh, all right. Well, let's skip that one. Okay. Okay, out-of-state donors boost Mamdani's coffers by $350,000. So this is the Muslim communist who's now the Democrat Party's candidate for the uh, New York City mayor election in November. And I noticed that more and more Democrats are coming out in support of him. So they've decided that they're going to get behind this guy and put him in charge of New York City. Okay. That's going to help President Trump, obviously. You know, it's going to help, him in the midterms next year, I'm sure. Okay. Let's not, one important principle is never interrupt an opponent who's in the process of destroying himself. So let's follow that principle and say nothing about this, okay? Yeah. Mamdani is mayor. Yeah, great. I think he'll make a great mayor. Okay. All right, that's about it. Okay. For Newsmax. Anyway. Yeah, I'm sure he'll make a fantastic mayor. Yes. Oh my goodness. New York, you gotta be kidding me. All right, let's see here. Okay, there's Newsmax. Okay. Look at that. They're so so light on news that they have this kind of a headline. Yeah. All right, let's see here. Can you talk about a special prosecutor for the Epstein scandal? And producer prices that were announced yesterday morning, a crushed tariff inflation doom mongers, you say. The producer prices were down a bit apparently, but someone was pointing out that that doesn't really account for the import prices. Well, maybe so. Okay. Coca-Cola to start using real cane sugar and Coke in the U.S., according to President Trump. All right. And Ted Cruz introduces bill to label the Muslim Brotherhood a foreign terrorist group. Muslim Brotherhood has been connected to terrorism for a long time. That's true. And he treated me like a brother. Bolsonaro says he is passionate about Trump and America. Right now, President Trump is putting or explaining the tariffs against Brazil as an effort to help Jair Bolsonaro, the former president of Brazil. It was a conservative, and of course, the current president of Brazil, whose nickname is Lula, is a out-and-out communist. Let's see, the teachers union does not like the fact that Supreme Court is allowing the Department of Education to slash its workforce. Of course not. The teachers union, they are not about children. They are about power, their own power. And let's see. All right. See here, Democrat Representative Takano. Mamdani is realistic. I don't know where idea his anti-business comes from. let's go. Yeah, we got a couple of minutes. Let's go into this just for fun. Yeah. On Wednesday's broadcast of News Nation's Elizabeth Vargas reports. Oh no, Elizabeth Vargas. Who's she waiting? Who's she working for now? News Nation. She interviewed the king, right? Uh, and really tried to do a hit job on the second king of Chenuguk. Now it looks like she's working for this News Nation. What's News Nation? Anyway, Representative Mark Takano, Democrat of California, stated that he doesn't understand where the idea that New York City mayoral candidate Assemblyman Zoran Mamdani is anti-business comes from, and Mamdani seems very rooted in a realistic understanding of where half of New Yorkers get their employment, small businesses. Takano said, well, his charm and his charisma did not disappoint, and it was a great opportunity for me to get to know him, and it was a wonderful meeting. Host Elizabeth Vargas then asked, business leaders met with Mamdani yesterday in New York City, and they were not impressed. One said that his complete lack of executive experience, his naive understanding of how the world works, and his rigidly ideological views on socialism make him dangerous. That's the business community in New York City. What do you make of that? Takano responded, I don't know which businessman said that, and I don't know what that's emblematic of, all the people who are businessmen. I can tell you that what attracted me to Mamdani and his social media was his video Halal Inflation, where he is very much the advocate of small business people in New York City. Halal falafel vendors in New York City who can't seem to get food permits or food selling permits, it costs them $17,000 to pay somebody else who holds the permit instead of the $400 that they would pay to a city, which does not seem interested in officially processing their permits. I see him as a fighter for small business entrepreneurs. I don't know where this anti-business idea comes from. He seems very rooted in a realistic understanding of where half of New Yorkers get their employment, small businesses. Now, is he saying that half of New Yorkers are selling halal falafels? Surely not, but anyway. If he becomes mayor, then all of New York can be eating halal falafels. Great. Later, Takano said that a lot of Mamdani's ideas will have to go through the city council, and there will be modifications to some of them. Well, in that case, why have a mayor in the first place? Just let the city council rule the city, govern the city. I'm sorry, did I say rule? But Elizabeth Vargas, wow, looks like News Nation. What is News Nation? Now I'm curious about Elizabeth Vargas because she did her best to do a hit piece on the second king. Unbiased U.S. News, it says. Okay. Let's find out who these people are. American cable news network owned by Nexstar Media Group, known for most of its history as Superstation WGN. Oh, WGN is a Chicago news station, right? Yeah, that was a Chicago news station before becoming WGN America in 2008. It relaunched in 2021 as a cable news. Right, okay. So Elizabeth Vargas was with the ABC, and she was a pretty prominent journalist on ABC. And then, forgotten the circumstances, but she had to leave ABC, and then she went to, what is it? One of the sort of the, subsidiaries, much less prominent subsidiary. And then her first sort of project in that subsidiary was to do this series called Cults and Extreme Beliefs or something like that, right? And we were part of that. Our community, Sanctuary Church, was part of that. And she did, the usual thing. And this was supposed to get her back into the good graces, I guess, of ABC and to get her promoted back there. But it looks like her career keeps going down. And now she's in this WGN spinoff, I guess, right? All right, time to go. Time to go. Uh, so I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Friday, so yes, I'll see you then. God bless, Godspeed. May His kingdom